In 2024, Apple did something it almost never does. They admitted defeat. $10 billion, a decade of work, 2,000 employees, all of it gone. But here's what nobody's talking about. Apple didn't fail because they couldn't build a car. They failed because they couldn't decide what car to build. And that single fact reveals something far more disturbing about how even the world's most successful companies can spend $1 billion a year burning money on a product that would never exist. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Apple's car project wasn't just a failure, it was inevitable. Because the problem wasn't technical, it wasn't financial, it was something much harder to fix. Let's go back to 2014. Apple had just launched the Apple Watch, the iPhone was printing money, and Tim Cook was looking at the car industry the same way Steve Jobs once looked at mobile phones. Tesla was proving electric cars could work, Google was betting billions on autonomous vehicles, and Apple saw an opportunity to do both, which sounds smart until you realize that's where everything started to go wrong. Because here's what most people don't understand about Apple's car project, codenamed Project Titan. It wasn't one project, it was 4 completely different projects wearing the same name. And every time Apple changed direction, they weren't pivoting, they were starting over. The first version was simple: build an electric car to compete with Tesla. Revolutionary design, seamless integration with your iPhone, the kind of experience only Apple could deliver. Hundreds of engineers were hired from Porsche, Mercedes, and Lamborghini. Jony Ive, Apple's legendary designer, started sketching concepts. One looked like a reimagined 1960s Volkswagen microbus, all white exterior, glass roof, white wall tires. They called it the bread loaf. But then someone asked the question that would haunt this project for the next decade: why stop at electric when we could go fully autonomous? And this is where things start to get strange. By 2016, Apple had completely changed its mind. Forget competing with Tesla. The real opportunity wasn't electric vehicles, it was self-driving cars. No steering wheel, no pedals, meaning the car could drive itself anywhere, anytime, in any condition. Apple would build the software, the AI, the brain of the future, then maybe license it to other car makers, or build their own vehicle, they weren't sure yet. Steve Zadesky, the project's first leader, left the company. Too much infighting, too many disagreements about direction. Bob Mansfield, a semi-retired Apple hardware legend, was brought back to save it. Mansfield's assessment? The car itself was a bad idea. Focus on the autonomous software. That's where the value was. He started cutting hundreds of employees and narrowing the focus. But here's the detail that changes everything. While Apple was debating whether to build a car or just the software, they had a chance to skip the entire problem. Between 2017 and 2018, the exact timing is disputed, but the moment is not. Elon Musk is drowning. Tesla is in what he later called production hell with the Model 3. The company is weeks away from bankruptcy, and according to Musk, he reached out to Tim Cook about Apple acquiring Tesla. Think about that. Apple could have bought the entire company, the team, the technology, the factories, the brand, for roughly $60 billion, 1/10 of what Tesla is worth today. Tim Cook refused to even take the meeting. Now, there are conflicting accounts about what actually happened. A book later claimed Cook did speak to Musk, but the deal fell apart when Musk allegedly demanded to become Apple's CEO. Both Musk and Cook denied that version. What we know for certain is this: no meeting happened, no deal was made, and Apple went back to trying to figure out how to build a car from scratch. That decision solved one problem and created a bigger one. Because now Apple wasn't just competing with Tesla, they were competing with Tesla and trying to master autonomous driving, and trying to figure out if they even wanted to build a car at all. Meanwhile, Tesla was fixing its production problems, scaling up, and running away with the market. So what did Apple do? They changed their minds again. In 2018, Doug Field returned to Apple. He'd spent the previous 5 years at Tesla, leading Model 3 development, the exact program that nearly bankrupted the company. Apple thought Field could bring order to chaos. The new plan? Build a car, make it electric, and make it fully autonomous, combine the best of both visions and launch it by 2024. For a moment, it seemed like Project Titan finally had direction. Engineers started building prototypes. One version, tested in 2020, looked like the Canoe lifestyle vehicle, a white minivan with a glass roof, sliding doors, and seats that faced each other like a private jet. No steering wheel, no pedals, just a giant screen, voice control through Siri, and the assumption that Level 5 autonomy would somehow, eventually, work. Except it didn't work, and this is where the story gets uncomfortable. Because here's what nobody at Apple wanted to admit. Full self-driving wasn't just hard, it might be impossible. At least, impossible within the timeline and budget Apple was willing to commit. Tesla couldn't do it. Waymo couldn't do it. Why did Apple think they had cracked the code? But they kept trying, and burning through money. After a few years, Doug Field left. In 2021, he left to join Ford, the fourth leadership change in 7 years. Kevin Lynch, the executive behind the Apple Watch, took over, and he immediately faced the same question everyone before him had faced. What the hell are we actually building? By now, the car had gone through dozens of designs. Johnny Ive's minimalist Volkswagen bus, a wedge-shaped concept with a dramatic front end, a version that looked nearly identical to Volkswagen's ID Buzz, which some former Apple employees claimed VW might have copied from Apple's internal designs after engineers defected to the German company. The team even tested features that sound absurd in hindsight. Microphones on the outside of the car to pipe in external sounds, because obviously passengers couldn't just roll down a window. Touchscreens suspended from the ceiling, a sunroof that reduced heat from the sun using some kind of special coating. And through it all, one fact kept surfacing. This car was going to cost at least $100,000 to build, maybe more, which meant selling it for even more. And in the car industry, where profit margins are razor thin compared to iPhones, that was a disaster waiting to happen. Some employees started calling the project the Titanic disaster. But what's fascinating is that Apple kept going, because they weren't just trying to build a car anymore, they were trying to prove they could still innovate beyond the iPhone. However, here's what makes this story really interesting. For years, people have wondered why tech companies struggle to build cars. Google spent billions on Waymo and still can't sell you an autonomous vehicle. Amazon bought Zoox, and you probably never heard of it. Even Tesla, the success story, nearly died multiple times. The answer is simpler than it seems. Cars are really, really hard. Not because the technology is impossible, but because cars exist in the physical world, where mistakes happen. A buggy iPhone app is annoying, a buggy self-driving system is manslaughter. The regulatory hurdles, the liability, the testing requirements, they're all designed to slow you down, which is exactly what tech companies hate. But there's something deeper going on with Apple specifically. Because Apple's entire philosophy is about control. They control the hardware, the software, the ecosystem, the retail experience. It's why their products work so well together. But it's also why they're terrible at partnerships. They wanted to build the car themselves because they didn't trust anyone else to meet their standards. This meant they needed to master manufacturing at a scale they'd never attempted. They needed to build service centers. They needed to navigate global auto regulations. They needed to do all the things traditional car makers spent a century learning how to do. And they realized they couldn't. So, what did they do? They changed their minds one more time. In 2023, Kevin Lynch finally convinced Apple executives to give up on Level 5 autonomy. Forget the dream of a car that drives itself and build something more modest, Level 2 autonomy, basically fancy cruise control and lane keeping. Add a steering wheel and pedals. Compete with Tesla on electric vehicles, not on self-driving. It was the same idea they'd started with 9 years earlier. But by now, the market had changed. Tesla had pulled ahead. Chinese EV makers were flooding the market with cheaper alternatives. Traditional automakers like Ford and GM were launching electric vehicles. And Apple would be entering as a newcomer with no manufacturing expertise, no dealership network, and a product that needed to be significantly better just to justify the Apple premium. The math didn't work. And this is the detail that makes everything snap into focus. Apple realized they were building a $100,000 plus car in a market that was moving towards $40,000 cars. They were aiming for a 2026 launch in an industry where the competition was already years ahead. And most importantly, they were doing all of this while a new technology, generative AI, was exploding in importance, which meant those 2,000 engineers working on Project Titan could be working on AI instead. In February 2024, Tim Cook made the call. Project Titan was dead. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Apple wasted $10 billion. So what? They're worth trillions of dollars. They make billions in profit every year. But that misses the point entirely, because the failure of the Apple car wasn't about money. It was about something that can't be bought: focus. Apple spent a decade unable to decide what they were building: electric or autonomous, car or software platform, partner with another manufacturer or build it themselves. Every time they changed direction, they weren't getting closer to an answer. They were asking the question over again. And that reveals the uncomfortable truth about Apple post-Steve Jobs. He was famous for saying no, for killing projects, for forcing brutal clarity. Tim Cook is famous for being diplomatic, for building consensus, for letting teams explore possibilities, which works great when you're iterating on the iPhone, but when you're trying to enter a completely new market, that indecision is lethal. Here's what really happened. Apple tried to do too much. They wanted the revolutionary design of a Level 5 autonomous vehicle and the practical reality of a car people could actually buy, and the profit margins they were used to in consumer electronics, and the control over manufacturing that made their supply chain famous. You can't have all of those things. Something has to give. And at Apple, with no single leader willing to make that call, nothing gave. So the whole project collapsed under its own weight.
But here's the ironic part. Apple hasn't really left the car industry. They just left the part they were bad at. CarPlay is in the vast majority of new cars sold today. It's the screen, the interface, and the gateway between your iPhone and your vehicle. Apple controls your experience in millions of cars without having to build or service a single one. Which is exactly what Bob Mansfield suggested 8 years ago when he took over Project Titan and said, forget the car, focus on the software. If Apple had listened then, if they'd killed the car project in 2016 and gone all in on CarPlay, on automotive software, on the parts of the business they actually understood, they'd be in a stronger position today, and they wouldn't have burned $10 billion trying to figure that out. Instead, they spent a decade chasing a dream that was never really coherent, not because they lacked the talent or the money, but because they lacked something simpler: the ability to decide what they wanted. So what does this tell us? It tells us that even the best companies are not immune to indecision, that spending money without direction is just another word for waste, that the hardest part of innovation isn't coming up with ideas, it's killing the bad ones before they destroy you. Apple's car failed because it was 5 different cars pretending to be one, and every time they switched visions, they reset the clock, burned more cash, and lost more time to competitors who knew exactly what they were building. The truth is, Apple probably could have built a great car, but only if they decided what great meant. And that's the one thing they never did. 10 years, $10 billion, and the only thing they proved is that even Apple can't build a product they don't understand. The question isn't why Apple failed, it's why they waited so long to admit it.